Hi everyone, good afternoon. I want to introduce to you Peter Ma. He's with England-Thims Miller for almost over 30 years. He graduated from the University of Florida in 1988 with a degree in civil engineering. And since then, developers rely on his expertise in land development in property types such as residential, multifamily, mixed use, industrial, and other commercial types. His work ranges from 2 acres to other huge master plan communities. Some of the work that you may recognize is Celebration Point, Bucky's Travel Centers, and the Strand and St. John's Town Center. So in his free time, he likes hanging out with his wife and his 3 kids, going to Gator football games, cycling, and running. So without further ado, Peter Ma.
It's actually quite an honor to get invited to come and speak to you guys. I mean, I'm a civil engineering graduate back in late 80s, and to get invited to speak at the College of Business is my honor, so thank you. So a little quick background. So my family immigrated to the United States when I was a little boy back in the 70s. First year we lived in Norfolk, Virginia, very cold, didn't like it at all. So we ended up moving to Jacksonville, and that's where I went through grade school all the way up, and that kind of explained my Southern Chinese accent. So went to University of Florida. I mean, that was a great place, home away from home. Got my degree in civil engineering, and graduated, went to work for a couple places that, wasn't all that great. I was very fortunate to land with the England-Thims Miller back in 1993. So in 93, we were a 40 employee company. Today we're 350. So our office is predominantly in Northeast Florida, but we have an office in Daytona, and we also have an office that's really gaining steam in Orlando. So we don't want to be everywhere. We just want to, be places where we have the relationship: Jacksonville, Daytona, Orlando. We're looking to go into Tampa. We have to find the right guy, to open that office. So, when I first started with England-Thims Miller, I was just another design staff engineer and did a bunch of calculation, plan, production, design. Our company is founded on doing land development jobs, so that's basically our bread and butter. Since that time, we branched out to other part of our different sector. We have a roadway group, a GIS group, landscape architect, but we grew the business in master plan community. So we specialize in big land development projects. So one of our first and iconic projects is the Nocatee master plan community part of it in St. Johns County, the other part's in Duval County. That's a 15,000 acre master plan community. The Davis family, who owns the land, they're the original owner and founder of Winn-Dixie Grocery Center, who now is no longer around, I don't think. But they own, back then they had 45,000 acres, basically in the middle of Jacksonville. They decided to break away 15,000 acres to develop, and we started that in the late 90s. Went through all the entitlement phase. Took us 4 or 5 years to get through entitlement. Back then, it was we had to go through the DRI, Development of Regional Impact. That's where you had to submit to the state, and all the State Department, had to give their comments, and you had to adjust your plan based on that. So that one, we, 04, 05, we came out of entitlement, so they hired us to start designing, all the master infrastructure, all the master pond, the big Nocatee Parkway that goes from US 1 to the beaches, if anybody knows that area. And so we finished design '06, went under construction '07, '08, and then, the Great Recession hit. So nothing got sold, but we built all these roads out there, which was great for avid cyclists like me. So there's no cars, there's no development. We got to go out there and ride, clean asphalt, and, didn't have to worry about cars. Now, Nocatee has since, coming out of recession, become one of the top 3 selling communities in the country. So, again, my role started as staff engineer. Again, did all the permitting, did all the nuts and bolts. Then during the recession, prior to that, we were predominantly doing big master plan communities. But all the smaller projects, we really didn't focus on that. So we decided, I would take the lead on focusing on everything else other than master plan community. So my role is, anything from a 2-acre Wawa. We do a bunch of apartments, industrial parks, industrial warehouse. So, and my role grew to basically out of the design phase and into more of the real estate side, the strategic side, where a repeat client or potential client, a lot of brokers, they would have a site and they come and call me, and I would, quickly look at it and tell them what all the big ticket items is going to be, the items that could break a deal. And for brokers, that's very important for them. If brokerage, they don't get paid until the land or close or the project close. So they don't want to waste a lot of time, coming to find out 12 months later that, hey, you got this big problem that your client can't close and they don't get paid. So they, I have built a, network of broker friends that calls me and say, hey, I've got this site, what's my issues that I'm facing, civil related issues that can cause me not to close. So we talked about this, our portfolio. Uh-oh, just the arrow, right? It did find the first lie. Oh, there we go. Did it pause? Just like, this is some of the quick, history of what we have. It's privately owned. We have basically 7 major partners, and then the rest associate partners. These are some of the sectors where we have our business in. Here are some of the basically our big master plan community that we're involved with. Nocatee, 15,000 acres. The Wildlight, Rainier owns that in Nassau County. That's at 24,000 acres. We just started that 3 or 4 years ago. That's going to be a 40-year build out. So when that gets built out, I'll be done. So E-Town, Argyle Forest, Silverleaf. So Oakleaf, the 6,000 acre, I worked on that pretty exclusively from '99 to 2007. So everything you see, if you ever driven through Oakleaf, everything you see out there, I was involved with. Very fortunate. So these are some of our master plan communities. So some of the major deal-breaking issue is floodplains, FEMA floodplains. So this is a perfect example. A client out of Louisville had called me and, hey, we got this great site off of 95 and Owens Road. This is north by the airport. Great site, looks like it's clear. We want to build, gosh, I think 400 unit apartments. So first thing I do is I pull up a floodplain. Everything you see in blue is the FEMA 100-year floodplain. So that's about 90% of the site. The brown is not so bad. That's a 500 year. So So that really does not affect the development, but you can see this impedes the development. So when you have FEMA floodplain, this is the city of Jacksonville. What the city of Jacksonville makes you do is whatever volume you're filling in, you got to replace it. It's called compensatory storage. So imagine if there's a 100-year storm and it floods this place like it's shown in the blue, that water, if you put fill on it, that water's got to go somewhere else. And so you can't not take care of that issue. So, but the problem is, on a floodplain, you got to find available land that's next to the floodplain, that's not in floodplain right now, and you have to go and scrape it down to make up that volume. So what you have here, this is the example that I try to show with the house. We have BFE is a base flood elevation. And let's say, your existing ground is 10. So let's say this is 5 acres. So you're filling in 5 acres, 2 feet of fill. So that's 10 acre feet, that's a volume. So the problem with building compensatory storage, and especially coastal area like Jacksonville, is the seasonal high groundwater. So over here, you're trying to make up for the volume. Everything below the seasonal high groundwater, you don't get credit for it because it's already filled with water, it's groundwater. So you get the credit between the seasonal high and the base flood elevation of 12. So you get 6 inches. So to make up that 10 acre feet, and you don't have 6 inches of play, you need 20 acres to make up that volume. So usually that's cost prohibitive. The client tried to go to the land to the west and try to buy that, because all that is not in the floodplain. And the thought was that they buy it and they scrape it down. But unfortunately, only one buyer was willing to sell the corner piece, and the buyer that's south of the corner piece didn't want to sell. So there was no direct connection to the floodplain, so we couldn't make it work hydraulically. So this is interactive, so if y'all got questions, just shout. Yes, sir.
So I'm assuming they bought the land, once they found out, was this before they bought it? Or?
No, so they were, most developers are pretty sophisticated. We were going due diligence phase. They did spend money on topo. They did spend money on a FEMA floodplain specialist. There's a specialist that all they do is this. And they spent money on delineating the wetlands. So they were in the hole for, probably $250,000. And they had to go through a rezoning, comp plan and rezoning. So they spent money on that. And at the whole time I was telling them, hey, we need to figure this out. And they kind of ignored it until they realized, hey, this site can't be developed. So they spent some money, but they walked away from the deal. The site is still available. I looked at this for the Louisville client probably 2 years ago. Every few months I get a call from either another prospective client or a broker asking me about the site. And I tell them, hey, this is what you're facing. And usually I don't hear back on this particular site. Yes, sir.
Can you buy the property to the north?
That's a good observation. So we looked at that. So unfortunately, the Owens Road that goes east and west, that's the dividing line of different drainage basins. So everything north of the Owens Road goes northward. So if you buy it and basically dig a hole on the north side, and then you fill in the piece on the south side on a 100-year storm, there's still no place for that water to go. So that's a good observation. That was one of the first questions that my client asked me. So Any other questions? FEMA floodplain is a big deal. And there's different, most website, municipality, I mean, they should have a FEMA floodplain layer on it. And there's different categories. There's a zone A and there's zone AE, basically. If you're zone X, you're good. X means you're out of the 100-year floodplain. Zone AE means that you have a base flood elevation is already determined. This is the floodplain. This is where the floodwater, how high it's going to go. If you're zone A, nobody has done a study on that. So they don't know where the base flood elevation. We've got a Wawa developer looking at a piece in Middleburg, and they have a zone A on most of the site. I'm like, hey, before we do anything else, we got to figure out what the base flood elevation is, because you don't really know what you have. Yes, sir.
What's the process like to actually generate this map? Like, it seems pretty precise in terms of like,
Well, that's funny you asked that. So we have, our company has a GIS group. We have 20 software engineer, very expensive. And they create our GIS portal. So this is, that's another line of business that we're trying to get into. We've got one multifamily developer that gave us all the parameters that they're looking for a site. And our software engineer basically programs it in, and it's in a portal so they can access it with a PC, laptop, phone, or whatever. But they gave us all the parameters, and we produce this heat map for them all throughout the state of Florida. And the heat map doesn't identify the site, but it identifies, okay, based on your parameter, this is where you need to look. So we've developed, I mean, this is big data. The data's out there, and we just accumulate all the data into one portal. But that's what's generated these maps. Yes, sir.
So is this land just undevelopable until somebody could potentially buy the corner lot and create some space for the water to flow into?
Yeah, yes. That's one solution. Another solution is, another way to do it, it's not cheaper, is to go downstream and improve whatever constriction you have downstream. And there's the airport road that runs parallel to Owens Road that leads to the airport. There's a couple pipes that goes underneath the airport road. And we haven't, I mean, it takes a lot of money to do the study. We haven't done the study, but maybe you can improve that culvert and allow more water to go through, that you can fix this problem. But also you need to look at the downstream. What problem are you causing downstream? So, but that's way technical here. So that's the FEMA issue. That's the very first thing I look at. It's like, I had another site in North Jacksonville, a bunch of brokers and potential client called me on, and I've looked at it a few times already. And we get on, I'm on the call, and I get on my PC and find the site, turn on a FEMA floodplain. 100% is in a floodplain, and it's zone A too. So we don't even know what the base flood elevation is. So that's kind of, what I do every day. I just look at different real estate and look at different issues, and then I identify all the issues and come up with a strategy. And if it's still affordable, we go to the next stage where we do due diligence, and then we go to the next stage where we do design permitting. I've got several teams that I sort of transition that project to once we get to that stage. So the other, this is an example. This is an apartment piece we did off of US 1, actually by our office. This has, the green is the FEMA floodplain. This one, we were successful in providing the comp storage to the east. The floodplain was not as between the base flood elevation and existing was not that deep. And we were right next to the creek, so we determined that the post-seasonal high was basically the bottom of the ditch, so we were able to do a compensatory storage right next to it on the triangular piece. So this piece is under construction right now. All right, wetland mitigation. So this is same piece of properties. Wetlands is another big issue. So when you pull up a lot of these websites off a municipality, they'll show you the National Wetland Inventory, the NWI wetland map. And it's not a definitive wetland. This is kind of where you start off with. And you would have to hire, develop. So this looks like, okay, it's not too bad, maybe 30% wetlands. It's not too bad. But that's, again, it's not definitive. It's just a quick look. Somebody somewhere had a quick look. What you have to do with wetlands, you have to hire a wetland consultant, and they have to go out there and they have to flag the wetlands, the actual wetlands, and survey it. And the agencies like the Water Management District, the Army Corps of Engineer, or DEP, one or the other, have to go out there with the wetland consultant and walk the lines that they flag and agree or disagree. So we sent the wetland consultant out there and they surveyed it, and this is basically all the yellow is wetlands. So what you thought you had, 60% developable, now it's the other way around, so maybe 30%, if that. So not only this site had, this was a perfect example of all the deal-breaking issue, this site. You had the floodplain, you had the wetlands. So this was, outrageous wetlands, but 2 years ago it was affordable. So right now in the state of Florida, wetland mitigation is a problem. So you could impact wetlands, and you could pay into a mitigation bank. You can pay for credits, and basically once you pay that and you get a permit, you could wipe out the wetlands and develop. Now there's a shortage of mitigation banks. So the mitigation banks, at this time when we looked at this, for one credit back then, 2 years ago, probably under $100,000 a credit. Now, a credit is not direct one-to-one of impact. It's usually the quality of the wetland. They call it a UMAM score, U-M-A-N. UMAM score is based on the quality. It's either from 0.1 to 1, 1 being the most pristine wetland and 0.1 being the lowest wetlands. And you take that and multiply by the wetland impacts, and you get this is a credit that you need. Back then, 2 years ago, it was probably $90,000 a credit. Today, if you could find it available, it's $180,000 a credit. And back then, 2 years ago, you could put a deposit on a mitigation credit and then don't have to pay the rest of it. You put a 10% down, you don't have to pay for it until you start construction. Nowadays, the banker knows that there's a shortage. So you put a deposit down and you got to close, you got to pay the rest of it in 60 days. So, and if you don't use it, it goes back to the mitigation banker. Yes, sir.
What's the physical difference between the wetlands and the non-wetlands? Is it like a habitat thing, a lot of care?
I'm sorry?
What's the physical difference between the wetlands and the non-wetlands? Like between the stuff.
Well, wetlands, so a lot of times it's the plant, so that what the wetland consultant goes out there and is the type of plants that's in the wetlands, that they identify that, and those wetlands serves a purpose for wildlife. So that's basically what they look at. And sometimes it's the soils too. So as a civil engineer, a land development engineer, we're not a specialist in anything, but we know a little bit about everything. So, but what I've been told is the soil's a little different and the plant's a little different for the wetlands. So mitigation is a big time problem now. I got have a 1,200 acre single family residential development that we started 18 months ago, about 2,000 lots, right in the heart of St. Johns County. If y'all don't know, St. Johns County is one of the fastest growing county in the state, #1 school system in the state, public school. And got about 2,000 lots, and we don't have credits. I mean, we're ready for the permit. We got all the drawings done, but the banker back in fall said, hey, we're going to have it mitigation credit available in December. Well, December came gone, no credit. Hey, we're going to have it in March. March is now, none available. We're going to have it in July. So, development is, when you're dealing with wetland impacts, that can slow you down if you don't have mitigation. Any questions? Yes, sir.
You mentioned a shortage of credits. Is it based on a specific area, for instance, for this project, would it be only for Duval County?
So again, it's a different drainage basin. Different area of Duval County has different drainage basin you can buy credits from. I'm not sure what determines what, but right now, not only Duval County, but St. Johns County, Nassau County, and Clay County, all that northeast Florida, there's a shortage of mitigation banks. And mitigation banker has to basically buy a piece of raw land and they restore it to some type of wetland that provide habitat for, environment for wildlife. And the district, water management district, has to go out there and basically approve, okay, you enhanced it, or you did, whatever, and now you're given this amount of credit that you could sell. And also, yes, sir.
Well, how would one go about creating a land bank?
Well, you have to buy a piece of property, usually old farmland that's been disturbed. It probably used to be some wetland years ago, decades ago, and you buy farmland and then you basically rehydrate it, either through drainage system or plant different plant species. So that's what I understand about it. Now, the other thing that's tough on wetland permitting, so you have state wetlands and you have federal wetlands. Okay, state is controlled by the Water Management District. And up till December 2020, the federal wetlands was controlled by Army Corps of Engineers. Now, December of 2020, Florida kind of outsmarted themselves, decided, hey, DEP is going to take over the federal wetland permitting. And so without any staff, without any training, December came and there you go. DEP's handling all the federal wetland permitting. So there was a huge learning curve for them all the staff to figure out what they needed to do to permit wetlands. And so now we got them trained up, this past year. And about a month ago, there was a judgment, there was a federal court judgment that says, hey, that's not legal. You got to have all the federal wetland permitting done by the Corps. So there's 3 states that was doing that, and now we have to revert back to the Corps. And I think it was a Thursday. The judgment came on a Thursday. That Thursday night, DEP issued a memo to all their staff to stop reviewing anything that's related to federal wetlands. And so now I think next week, I believe, there's another hearing that DEP is going to try to basically retain the permitting rights, but I don't think that's going to happen. So it goes back to the Corps to review. And so for all this time, this 3 or 4 years, all the wetland reviewer with the Corps, they left, and so now they don't have staff. So now any development that requires a lot of wetland impact permitting is going to get stalled out. So go for tortoises. So it's, we make a joke in Jacksonville, that Northeast Florida. If you don't have wetlands, you have gopher tortoises. So this is a perfect site. This is on Emerson Zoo Parkway, if you know where Jacksonville Zoo is. This is kind of catty corner from it. So gopher tortoise loves to be in sandy soil and deep groundwater. And so if you don't have wetlands, you have this type of condition: sandy soil, groundwater's 10, 15 feet deep. And this is about 200 acres, about 3 million square feet industrial park. And so we had a wildlife consultant that went out there and looked for all the burrows, gopher tortoise burrows out in the site. And they identify, I think they're broken down to active, inactive, juvenile, abandoned. But this site had a lot of tortoises. And when we developed this was 2021. There was a shortage of gopher. So what you do with gopher tortoises nowadays is you have to relocate them. Before, about 10 or 15 years ago, they used to have a taking permit. You just pay in a fund and you go on and develop. Nowadays, you can't do that. You have to relocate them to a gopher tortoise sanctuary area. Back when we permitted this, there was only one sanctuary in the state of Florida. So prior to that, the recipient site would charge about $3,000 a tortoise. 2021, that one sanctuary owner knew that there were only one in the state of Florida. They were charging $10,000. And that's not including the excavation fee, the biologist. The biologist has to be out there and make sure that there isn't any, check the tortoise, make sure they don't have any sinus issue. I guess there's some kind of gopher tortoise sinus problem that if you bring it to healthy tortoises, it gets spreads around. So my client Van Trust couldn't wait. I think the bill for this total came at about $750,000. And you can't move them during the winter. It has to be warm. You have to be 3 nights above 50 degrees at the recipient site before you can relocate them. So that was interesting. Now, some of these sophisticated landowners that had a taking permit, the taking permits are good forever. So if, like the Skinners or the Davis family that owns a large tract of land, they have a taking permit that they acquired 10, 20 years ago. And so nowadays, if you have a taking permit, there's a nonprofit organization that comes and basically relocate the tortoises for you for free. But that's kind of rare. And in this case, this particular case, we didn't have that. Questions? Yes.
How much does it normally cost to relocate at this scale?
At that time, it was $10,000 for the recipient site, and then another probably $3,000 for the backhoe, the biologists, and the wildlife consultant. So back then it was probably $13,000 a tortoise. Nowadays, there's more sanctuaries available, so now it's back down to $5,000 a tortoise. So, yes, sir.
So if I want to build on, let's say, like 50 acres of this 200-acre lot, are you able to just move the goat?
That's funny you say that.
And then,
That's funny. So when we were doing oak leaf plantation, that 6,000-acre piece out on the west side, we sent our wildlife consultant, and there's existing development on the east side of Oakleaf. And we found all the gopher tortoise burrows right along our side of the boundary. And we're like, okay, they threw those tortoises across the fence. Not supposed to. So, tree mitigation, this is another one that can make or break a deal. So this is a 7-acre piece client wanted to do a industrial outdoor storage. Looks pretty, okay, it's pretty easy, high and dry, there's no floodplain, no wetlands. Maybe a couple of tortoise, not bad. But when we got into it, well, you can't see this, but this is a survey of the trees. And what you find is on some of these land that's not been developed for a long time and has not been managed, the trees, I wouldn't say grow out of control, they just grow. And particularly hardwood trees. City of Jacksonville, either you replant the inches you take out or you pay in a tree fund. In this particular case, if you have more than 2 protected trees are mostly hardwood, oaks, maples, and what have you. If you have more than 2 protected trees, that's 24 inches or greater, per acre, your mitigation cost is double. So this particular case, we had more than 2 protected trees for the 7 acres, so we had more than 14 protected trees. So in this particular case, for a little 7 acre site, we had to pay basically $210,000 tree mitigation. And this is this is a fairly, that you can manage in your pro forma. On some of these bigger sites, like back, like this one here, this 200 acre also had protected trees, but the owner was sophisticated enough to have a timber status. So a timber status is basically, you call it a agricultural land, and you basically timber the trees and replant over the course of decades. And they had a timber status, so the tree mitigation didn't apply for this one. So on some of these other sites, this is a site in Julington Creek, former tree nursery. And one of my Shell Dailies convenience store wanted to develop this. And there was massive 60-inch, 48-inch trees. This is in St. Johns County. Not only do they have tree mitigation, in St. Johns County, they have a specimen tree rule. Basically, if it's over a certain size, 48-inch, and so tall, and the canopy is so wide, you can't bulldoze it. You have to leave it. So we had a site plan around this, and you can't put pavement over. So we drew out the circle of trees because that's basically where the tree roots are. And if you put any fill, 6 inches or more, that would kill the tree. So we had a basically site plan around these specimen trees. So, questions? Yes, sir.
So obviously it seems a little easier to just pay the mitigation fee, but is it substantially cheaper to replant, or is it not?
You have to replant enough. You have to show an effort to replant, and there's certain spacing required between trees when you replant. You could go up to a bigger diameter, but the bigger the diameter tree, the cost is exponentially higher. It's not linear, it's like way higher. So there's you've got to do an analysis of that. Yes, sir?
So these largest developers of Florida, don't they have their own sanctuaries, their own wetland banks?
Mm-mm.
No one.
Not many. It's rare that you have that. I don't know of any in Northeast Florida.
Why are they not interested in?
But that's not their business. That's not their business model. So their business model is development. And some of these sanctuary sites and wetland mitigation, you never know if the price goes up or down. But right now, development in Florida is extremely active. And so if you knew 5 or 10 years ago that this was going to happen, then yeah, you jump into it, but you know, nobody has a crystal ball. So we'll be doing something else if we did, right? Off-site utility. So this is funny. This is 800-acre industrial piece, 3.8 million square feet. This is in the planning stages. We haven't broken ground, but the developer out in New Jersey, Saxon Realty, closed on the land, and they knew that this was a problem. We've got water is 2 miles away. It's about, so I think they did a cost estimate. It's $12 million to get to the site. Not only we have to bring enough water to serve the demand of the industrial part, but fire protection, that's a big thing for industrial site. So we had I think it was a 24-inch water main. And then anything over a 20-inch can't be PVC, it has to be ductile iron, so it's even more expensive. This is about $12 million. Funny story to this, so JEA is the water and sewer provider up in Jacksonville, and a developer came down, and I had to set up a meeting with the CEO of JEA to see, hey, if there's any kind of cost participation. Hey, Peter, why don't you come along and, you know, just come along and listen. I said, okay, great. Show up to a meeting. Here's the CEO of JEA, Jay Stowe. He sits right next to me, and the developers, you know, going through their pitch and telling them about the economic, you know, driver, and it's going to bring jobs and, you know, all the stuff that they want to hear. Jay's asking me technical questions. A couple of them pretty easy questions. And then he says to me, well, you guys are a pretty big firm. What do y'all do on some other site that utility's far away? And I thought about it, and my quick answer was, well, we started up our own utility. Well, that was not the thing to say to this, you know, CEO of JEA. So I got word back 2 weeks later from my CEO, and you know, I got a talking to, and I said, well, you know, is it wrong? I mean, when we did Nocatee back in the 90s, early or late 90s, there wasn't any utilities around, and we actually started our utilities before JEA came in and made an agreement. So on the utility side, it's a big turf war, because you got customers that, you know, forever basically on your water and sewer. When we did Oakleaf, half of it was in Duval County served by JEA. The other half was in Clay County. The JEA, nobody had water close enough to Oakleaf. And JEA thought they had the rights. CCUA, Clay County Utility Authority, thought they had the rights. So we went to litigation. They sued JEA. We're a part of the JEA team. I was an expert witness. It's funny, the lawyer on your side made you out to be, you know, the best engineer in the world, and of course, lawyer on the other side is, you know, makes you look like you don't know anything about engineering. So that went through a whole litigation, and then finally they settled. That one we ended up breaking down all the parcels and make sure that half of it gets served by JEA and the other half by CCUA. All right, conservation easement. So this site is basically in the center of Jacksonville. If you, the road, this road is J. Turner Butler, east-west, main east-west corridor in Jacksonville. This is a bunch of the office park. That's Blue Cross Blue Shield. And about a half mile down is St. John's Town Center, if anybody knows. So I get a call every now and then about this site. Somebody bought it for like $50,000 5 years ago. And first time somebody called me about this, hey, what do you think about the site? Everything's developed all around it, pretty much. And I'm looking at it, I think that's in a conservation easement. So So what do you do to undo a conservation easement? One, you have to buy another piece of land that's equal or more in value to for the agency to consider. And then most of the time, the conservation easement is part of some wetland system. So not only you have to buy another piece equal or more value, now you have to mitigate for the wetlands. So this could be in the millions to undo the conservation easement. So also saw another site, first time I ever seen it, they had a conservation easement, very little small piece, but the conservation easement says that you have to go to court to undo it. So that was out of the question. So that's another deal-breaking issue. All right, we're going to go to some past case studies. So we were part of the Celebration Point back in 2014. That's when we started. This one, we came in, they had it entitled, but the local engineering firm, who's no longer in existence, couldn't really handle it. We took a look at it and said, hey, wait a minute, you got some area that you said that's going to handle, stormwater is going to be handled later, to be TBD, to be determined. Well, once you build out this whole system, this whole development, there's no place to put the stormwater. So thankfully, back then, this was 2014, 2015, we had a sharp drainage engineer that figured out the drainage area and made some different configuration on the stormwater ponds, and we were able to handle the rest of the drainage. This is Durban National. So this is the site, I-95 on one side, Racetrack Road, this is St. Johns County. On the west side, this is built. We had looked at this for a couple clients, and they had other consultant that already worked on it, and we looked at it. It kind of didn't really make sense to us, but this one client got it under contract. They were doing joint venture with Gate Petroleum. Gate owns the land, and they by coincidence one of their guys ran into our CEO and said, hey, we got the site. We can't figure it out because we got $8 million of import of dirt. And so we looked at it and say, I think we got the solution. Your consultant that did this put the ponds uphill. So when you put the pond uphill, the rest of the site has to be higher to drain into it. So we were able to reconfigure the ponds, and then it came out to be net zero import. So we were able to save them $8 million. The bigger eastern piece has not been developed. I think one of the Baptist clinic is going in there, a couple apartments. But this grand plan on the bigger east side never came to. This is Silverleaf. I don't know if you can see this. This is a 8,000 acre development in St. Johns County. Same developer that developed Oakleaf when I worked on it. And as that Oakleaf was tapering down, he bought this piece, and we were looking at this for him. So what we did here was that we had identified an off-site drainage canal that we say, hey, if you buy this drainage canal, you could lower all your normal water level in your pond. Well, when you lower the normal water level, you lower the fill needs. And in this particular case, we were able to lower 730 acres, 2.5 feet. So at that time, gosh, it's probably about 10 years ago, $30 million savings. So, questions? I think that's it. Yes, sir.
Of all the issues, like potential issues that you mentioned, is there one that's, I guess, like more common or more prevalent than others, like in terms of Florida?
Wetlands are a big issue. Wetlands are a big issue. I mean, being a floodplain, usually, you go in there really quickly, you can tell 100% floodplain, and this no go. But wetlands, you think you can either develop around it or trim it here and there. So wetlands, we see that a lot. Yes, sir.
Do you see the floodplain getting changed in the future, especially with some of the hurricanes that have passed by recently? Or at the very least, making places around that are near a 100-year floodplain more difficult to insure?
The FEMA flood maps gets changed every 10 to 12 years. So, and it's not very accurate either. My FEMA buddy, that's the FEMA consultant, he, whenever they change the maps, I mean, he gets a lot of work, because property owner hires him to basically do an analysis and fix the map to what it's supposed to be. Yes, sir.
You mentioned that some of the regulations around the gopher tortoises have gotten more strict over time. I'm wondering if you're seeing any other trends of areas in which the state is getting more strict on environmental stuff.
I mean, not only environmental, there's counties, I call them the kind of outlier counties, that thinks that that they're in an urban setting. So there's a lot of, like Nassau County and part of Clay County, it's kind of rural Florida, I think, it's kind of way out there. And they think that they want this urban style development, like kind of what y'all have here on University 13. That, you gotta have structured parking, you gotta retail on the bottom, apartments, on top. We're seeing a lot of that, those type of land development regulation. That doesn't make sense at all for me, versus, suburban style. I mean, I get it, they wanna limit the subdivision style of development and have everything more compact. I don't know if y'all ever been to Denver. So Denver's like that. They have a lot of compact development, and then they have wide open spaces that they preserve. So, yes, sir.
It's a bit related to that question, but in terms of climate change, what kind of effect do you think that would have on your industry in terms of, like, I know Florida's kind of projected within the next 20, 30 years, some places are going to be underwater.
Yeah, on coastal development, so we also represent the Jaguars. We just got hired to redo the stadium. We did the plans for the Four Seasons that's under construction, and a whole bunch of stuff next to the river. And all this coastal development, we have to hire a sustainability engineer to figure out, okay, in 50 years, where do we think the sea level is going to be, so your development's going to have to be at least that or higher. So, yes, sir.
So if you had a tract of land similar to one that had all the gopher tortoises on it, but it was classified as a timber tract, and they were performing operations on that, does that affect the gopher tortoises in any way, or like how you can treat them? Would you still have to remove?
You still have to remove them, unfortunately. Yes, sir.
When replanting trees, does the developer have to go buy land to replant those trees on, or is there like public land, or can they pay someone to plant the trees on their land?
Oh, for tree mitigation, they replant what they can on their site, and then they cut a check to the government, to the city. And City of Jacksonville, I think that goes in the general fund, so we don't know what they do with it. So, yes, ma'am.
How do you ensure that these wetlands, the gopher tortoises are actually protected? Because I feel like there might be people who don't do the proper mitigation and just try to build over it.
Well, the wetlands, the agency has infrared. So I've seen landowners that go in there and fill the site without any permits. But then when they sell it or try to sell it, and whoever comes in for a application, the Water Management District or the Corps of Engineer, they look back on the historical infrared aerials. So wait a minute, this was a wetland. I think one large landowner in Volusia County consolidated to Mocha. I think, I don't know when, 10, 15 years ago, there was a big fire in that area. And so they took that opportunity to fill in a bunch of the wetlands. I think the Buc-ee's in Daytona was one of the sites. So when Buc-ee's came in there and started developing, and they submitted plans, I think either the water management district and or the Corps of Engineers say, hey, wait a minute, this used to be wetlands. So somebody had to, pay a fine. I'm not sure who it was. But. Yes, sir.
So you mentioned that these like mitigation bank credits are around like $180,000. How much would it cost me, like, let's say I buy land for an old farm that was $7,000 an acre, and I want to kind of make it into a wetland area, like, about how many acres would you say it takes to make the wetland, to get that credit?
I mean, you would have to. It depends on the topography, depends on the drainage system. I mean, it's site specific on how much work you have to do to get it ready. And you have to permit this through the Water Management District and now the Corps of Engineers. So, and it seems like a long time. Yes, sir.
When relocating the gopher tortoises, when there was only one sanctuary, it was 10,000. So now that there's more sanctuaries, what is that average price gone to?
Right now it's 5,000. So they just opened up one in by the England Air Force on the Panhandle, and there's maybe a couple other ones. So now, last I heard, it was $5,000 to reach for the recipient site to take in the tortoises. Yes.
What do those sanctuaries look like? Are they just big, wide open fields that home managed?
Never seen one.
Never seen one. It's like a coconut.
I know the tortoises love to burrow deep angular holes. So I have not seen one. Yes, sir.
I know it's a big push in the agricultural sector, put a lot of these ranches into conservation easements. I think a lot of them are sort of also interested in having these gopher tortoise sanctuaries on their properties. Do you see a lot of sort of the combination of those two, those two interests coming together?
It could, depends on, again, gopher tortoise love sandy soils and groundwater has to be deep. Otherwise, there's no place for them, to dig into. So it depends. Anything else? Yes, ma'am.
You mentioned a potential stall out with wetland mitigation just due to different resources. In your experience working with Rainier and Wildlight and just up in that area, for all the land that's being sold to residential developers, what's the process going to look for them? What's the timeline and what do you think is going to be the remedy?
What was the question? I'm sorry.
For the problems with the wetland mitigation, for the residential developers that have been buying land over in that area, how long do you think the process is realistically going to take and what's going to be, in your opinion, the ultimate remedy for it?
Well, so on the Rainier deal, so they own the land, so they can sit on it as long as they need to. Also, that 20,000 acres that they own also has a lot of wetlands on it too. So the other thing you could do, instead of buying credits, mitigation credits, you could preserve on-site wetlands. But the ratio, 1 acre of wetland impact, you have to preserve 30 acres of wetlands. So that math may not work. So we're going through this on another deal right now. We're trying to preserve all of on-site wetlands to mitigate for the impacts. So, but used to be for wetland mitigation, you could do preservation of your on-site wetlands 30-1. You could do creation. You could dredge an upland and put plants and hydrate it, but you have to monitor it for 5 years. And the plants you put in has to survive 50% at the end of 5 years. Very time consuming, very costly. Not sure you're gonna be able to do it. And then the third one was paying into mitigation bank. That was the easiest way for the developer to cut a check and off they go. So now those other two, the preservation and the creation, they may come back down because of the lack of mitigation credits.
Other questions? Let's thank Mr.